Hi, everyone. My name is Garrett Chan. I'm the chair of the Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to start with a roll call. I'll read down the names, and if you could just let me know if you're present, that would be great. So Garrett Chan is here. Janine Graves? No Janine Graves, not yet. Dr. Tanya Altman?
Tanya Altman, present.
Thank you, Tanya. Dr. Tammy Vance Hole? See Tammy, but you might be on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry, couldn't get it unmuted. I am here.
Thanks, Dr. DeVantel.
Sure.
We have a new person. So LaCandice Ochoa. See Miss Ochoa here? Do not.
She was here.
Okay.
And she had a good mic and good audio, but it looks like she's bumped off. So she's
She's coming back.
There she is. Okay, and
Good
LaCandice,
morning. I'm
please
here.
say
I'm here. I switched to the app.
No.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you
And
so
then
much.
Just needs
Welcome, LaCandice. I'm sorry, go ahead.
she just needs to turn her camera on when she gets a moment.
Yep,
I
I'm
think she
working
had
on
she
it.
want I think she had a background question.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Ochoa, and welcome. We're happy to have you as an education representative for the college, Community College Chancellor's Office. So thank you and welcome. Dr. Wendy Hansborough.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Dr. Saji de Guzman.
Saji de Guzman present.
Thanks, Saji. Good morning.
Morning.
We have another new representative, Alice Benjamin, and I'm not sure if Miss Benjamin is here.
I'm not sure Miss Benjamin knows about her appointment yet. She was just voted in and appointed by the board last week. We have reached out, but we haven't received confirmation back from her yet.
Okay, fantastic. We look forward to her participation as one of our currently practicing APRN representatives, replacing Kim Doe, who cycled off of the committee. So we will welcome Alice when she comes to the next meeting. I have Dr. Hazel Torres.
Good morning. I am here.
Great. Good morning, Hazel. I have Judy Cornell.
Correct. I'm here.
Thank you, Judy. Welcome.
And she is replacing BBK.
Yes, BBK. So Barbara Barney Knox. And so Judy is the Deputy Director of Nursing, statewide Chief Nurse Executive for the California Correction Healthcare Services. And she is filling a seat of the Nursing Services Administration. So Judy, welcome. We want to warmly welcome you to this committee.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Kathy Hughes.
Kathy Hughes here.
Thanks, Kathy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Jacqueline Bowman. I see Jacqueline here. Let's see.
I don't see her.
See her either.
I think
Okay.
she might be the only one because I did see that Janine jumped on. So I believe that Jacqueline will be the only one.
Okay, great.
Not currently in attendance.
Okay. Excellent. Carmen Comsty. Carmen.
Good morning, Carmen Comsty here.
Great. Thanks, Carmen. Welcome. We have a vacant position for HCI. Dr. Joanne Spetz.
Present.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. And Sandra Miller.
Yep, here.
Wonderful, Sandra. Thank you. And then going back up to the top, Janine Graves.
I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Garrett.
And
So
I'm
we
here as well, Garrett, and so is legal.
Excellent. Getting down to that. Wonderful. So we have a quorum. So we can go ahead on to the next agenda item, which is general instructions for the format of a teleconference meeting. And I'm going to hand it over to our beloved friend, Mark.
Thank you. Good morning. This is the NUAC moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the committee reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. We will also query the in-person location to see if there are any requests for comments there. Right now, there is nobody present. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered, the committee will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for the members to know. Remember, committee members cannot address any item not on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at that moment, items that you would like to add to a future meeting, or items that will be discussed later on the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when committee members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute the microphone automatically.
Fantastic. Thank you, NEWAC moderator. So we're going to move to agenda item 3.0, public comments for items not on the agenda, for NEWAC to consider items for future agendas. And as noted in the agenda for today, the committee may not discuss or act on any matter raised during the public comment section that is not included on this agenda for today, except whether to decide to place the matter on the agenda for a future meeting. So we want to welcome people from the public to come to the mic and give any kind of public comment. And as I just mentioned, we're not allowed to respond, but we can discuss whether we put that matter on a future agenda. So NEWAC moderator, can you go ahead and open the mic for public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Chan, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in Sacramento. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. All
Thank you.
right. Thank you. We're going to move to agenda item 4.0 and 4.1, which is review and vote on whether to approve the previous meeting's minutes from September 12th, 2024. And so this is an opportunity for the public and the board, the NEWAC committee members to make comments or any kind of changes that you see that we need to make on the meeting minutes. So I'm going to open it up for discussion to the NEWAC members to see if there are any corrections or edits that we should make.
Hi, this is Saji. So I have to move a correction
Okay.
from our meeting minutes, page
Okay.
13, paragraph 1, line 10. The ICN conference was held in Aberdeen, Scotland, not in Germany.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Aberdeen, Scotland. Okay, not Germany. All right. Thank you, Saji.
Thank you.
Any other NEWAC members? I don't think I see any hands, so feel free to just speak up. Try to navigate different screens here.
This is Reza,
Yes,
legal
Reza.
counsel. Not that it's a huge deal. I'm just curious for Saji's last comment. If you recall, was that what was said during the meeting that it was Aberdeen, or is that a correction after the fact?
It is actually a correction. I don't think it was mentioned that the conference was in the ICN conference was in Germany. I was referring to a German on how they get their licensure in Germany, but not the ICN was not held there.
As far as what was said at the meeting in
Correct.
September, was it stated that it was Germany at that time,
No,
or Scotland?
it was Scotland. Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. We'll make the correction in the minutes. I
Thank you.
presume someone will move to adopt the minutes with that correction and any others that might come up, if any.
Thanks, Reza. Yes.
I'll move to adopt the minutes with that correction.
I'll second that, Altman.
Great. Thank you. So we have to open up for public comment. So
We will
NEWAC
be opening
comment,
for
yes.
public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Chan, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in Sacramento. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any last minute discussion by the NEWAC members? If not, we can go to vote. Okay, seeing that, I'll do a roll call. So Garrett Chan, yes. Janine Graves.
Yes.
Thank you, Janine. Tanya Altman.
Yes.
Thank you, Tanya. Tammy Ventol.
Yes.
Thank you, Tammy. LaCandice Ochoa.
Abstain.
Thank you, LaCandice. Wendy Hansborough.
Yes.
Thank you, Wendy. Saji de Guzman.
Yes.
Thank you, Saji. Alice Benjamin's not here. Hazel Torres.
Yes.
Thank you, Hazel. Judy Cornell.
Abstain.
Thank you, Judy. Kathy Hughes.
Kathy Hughes, yes.
Thank you, Kathy. Did Jacqueline Bowman ever sign on? No? Okay, thank you. Carmen Comsty?
Yes.
Thank you, Carmen. Joanne Spetz?
Yes.
Thank you, Joanne. Sandra Miller? Let's see, Sandra, are you still with
Sorry,
us?
unmuting. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. Nope, not a problem. All right, so the minutes are approved with the edit. All right, let's move to 5.0, which is discussion and possible action, implementation of Senate Bill 1015 during the 2023-24 regular session, and how to address 2785.6 subdivisions H1A through F of the Business and Professions Code. So I am, as you can see on the agenda information sheet, that Senate Bill 1015 was enacted and approved by signed into law by the governor as of September 27, 2024. And in the agenda information sheet, you can see the language that was lifted from 2785.6 subsection H1. So this bill directs the NEWAC, and we must, so shall is a requirement, we shall study and recommend standards regarding how approved schools of nursing or nursing programs manage or coordinate clinical placements. The study shall include at a minimum all of the following topics. So how approved schools of nursing or nursing programs maintain clinical education standards, the participation of approved schools of nursing or nursing programs and consortiums with other approved schools of nursing or nursing programs to manage or coordinate clinical placements, necessity and feasibility of a statewide consortium or regional consortiums under the regulatory oversight of the board to manage or coordinate clinical placements of approved schools of nursing or nursing programs, identifying reporting violations in section 2786.4, ensuring fair and equitable access to clinical placement among approved schools of nursing or nursing programs, and identifying necessary information for the board to collect to ensure that approved schools of nursing and nursing programs comply with the standards recommended by the committee. In addition, we are required that the board submit a report detailing NEWAC's findings and recommendations to the legislature. So I just wanted to read that out loud, and I wanted to invite Lori to give us, Executive Officer Melby, any additional information that you might want to share.
Actually, I was thinking of turning it over to Carmen, just because I know that this was a CNA sponsored bill. And so she would be able to give you a much better background than I ever could.
Great. Carmen, please.
Sure. So this bill was meant to, as you can see, to have NEWAC look at the issues surrounding clinical education, and particularly looking at, what is happening now with how schools are meeting educational clinical education requirements. So, those requirements, to remind everyone, include the 500 direct patient care hours required for clinical education, as well as the 30 hours for each specified clinical specialty area. So how are schools meeting that? How are schools participating in consortium? Because we know that some schools participate in nursing program consortiums, some do not. And then looking to see whether or not a statewide consortium or other regional consortium could be implemented by the board to help clinical placements and coordination of clinical placements. And then for the section of the Business and Profession Code that is referenced in item D, so section 2786.4, that is the prohibition on a school receiving funds in exchange for clinical placements, or sorry, the other way around, for a school paying to receive clinical placements. Maybe I don't know if Lori or Reza may want to have a better description of what that section is, but it's essentially the prohibition on paying to play for clinical placements. And one of the reasons that's in this section of the bill that was passed, SB 1015, was to help the BRN and have NEWAC identify ways that we can help the BRN on identifying when this provision of the BMP code is violated, and how the BRN could potentially enforce that with reporting and identification of violations of the code. And then the last two items, E and F, are really about trying to get at this question of inequitable access to clinical placements that we've been talking about for a number of years now, and I know that we have a subcommittee already to kind of look at the issues of inequitable access of clinical placements. So really, this is meant to help the BRN study the issue and identify ways to resolve the problem and recommendations so that we have a concerted effort to, by NEWAC, to help the BRN navigate these issues of clinical placements, clinical impaction. And then, I think F is really just meant to help figure out if there are ways that the BRN and with the recommendations of NEWAC can move to comply with the various standards and recommendations that NEWAC comes up with. I don't know if folks want to hear more about the intention behind the bill, but really this is meant to kickstart the discussion and have NEWAC take up this big issue of how do we make sure that schools can maintain the clinical education standards and provide clinical placements to their students.
And then I could jump in as well and just give some further updates and excuse me, background on this. So in 2020, we had a California state audit that came into the BRN. It started 2018, ended in 2020. And it was discussion about the board and how they approve clinical placements as well as enrollment growth. And that was something that when we got that report, our responses back, if you go back to the California State Auditor's recommendations, BRN's responses was, we need a statewide consortium, we need a statewide consortium, we need a statewide consortium. It's the only way to really get solid data. The issues with a statewide consortium is, one, BRN doesn't have the resources to manage that. So that would have to be contracted out through a possible vendor. It would not be something that we could house internally. The other thing is that when you're looking at consortiums, you always have to have a regional focus. So what you want is a consortium that has statewide data. You want all the data fields to be the same. You want what they collect, everything to be identical so that we can have comparisons. That's also very important because what we're seeing now in enrollment growth is you may have a campus located in Southern California, but because they're doing hybrid theory and such, and they might have students throughout the state. And so they'll be doing clinical placements in Northern California. So you have to be able to have similar data from north to south, east to west. It has to include all. The other thing with consortiums that has been very clear is a consortium is only good as the healthcare entities that join it. The consortiums cannot be managed by an academic institution. The academic institutions participate in the consortium to utilize the healthcare facilities for clinical placements. But if your healthcare facilities are not part of that consortium, they're not doing approvals and denials through that consortium, then you don't have the data that you need, right? Right now, the Board of Registered Nursing only has authority over the academic institutions. So we get secondhand information, right? We never get true facility-based data. We get the data that we receive from the academic institutions. Depending on who the people at the academic institutions talk to at the clinical facility, that data is different. You can literally have 3 schools using the same clinical placement and they talk to 3 different people on different areas and they'll get different data. And we've had that turned into us repeatedly. So that is, Garrett's in the dark.
I'm back.
You're back. And so with that, it's difficult. There was a excuse me, a bill last year that went through the legislative session, which was SB 1042 by Roth. And it really worked to look at that data issue. How can we get consistent data? How can we get it from the healthcare facilities? It did die in appropriations, and Senator Roth is no longer participating in this anymore. So he retired, which makes me very unhappy. because that was, to me and our board, a very huge step forward in the right direction to get that data that we had always needed to make these choices. The other thing that we have noticed now when we're talking about the 500 clinical hours is, one, you will see in the materials today, and we'll open that up in a future agenda item, that there are a request to decrease those in-person clinical hours even further. Additionally, I do receive letters in my email that talk about how they believe that how some people believe that the sheer just decreasing to 500 hours is a public safety risk. And so they're asking us to increase it back up to the 864 hours and go back to 75%. I think there's just a knowledge deficit on some of the people that have that thought process, because we do know that there is evidence that 50% is appropriate for clinical simulation. And with 864 hours being our requirement for clinicals and 500 in direct patient care, we're at 44% simulation right now with the way that we're currently implemented today. So we are under the 50% threshold, and we're above the 300, which is reported in the NCSBN study that it has to be 300 clinical hours. So we are in compliance with what the evidence supports. And so it's just about kind of providing that additional education out there and making sure that people are aware. I know that HCI is looking at statewide consortiums. I know that there are other state governmental agencies that are looking at statewide consortiums as well. When you move down to the identifying reporting violations of 2786.4, that has been a very difficult one for our board to pick up and implement. We do get complaints from various entities saying that they believe these schools are paying for placements. Very difficult to prove when it's an endowment, when it's a donation to simulation, when it's a I serve on the board of this healthcare facility, and I know they'll give us clinical placements because they're, as a board member, they'll vote for whatever might be needed at that healthcare institution. So it's very difficult to prove that the transfer of goods or promises or monies is related strictly to a clinical placement. And so that has not had the teeth, I believe, that we hoped that it would have, because it's not like somebody is writing it down in their budget that says, I just gave $2 million to this class, to this healthcare institution to pay for clinical placements. That's not usually how that is managed and done. So that makes it very difficult to really identify, report, investigate, and do anything specifically related to that. The one thing that we do have coming out is a clinical facilities approval data bank. That's something that we promised CSA that we would give. And it is every year. I'm saying it's nearing completion, but I promise you this year it is. It's actually in education right now. So we've got it completed. It's tested. Now we're making the education materials, and it will be released this year. So good news on that. What that will allow is at least we'll be able to accurately track the addition or loss of clinical placements by school. And so that will be something that we can pull on a report. We can pull it by healthcare agency, and we can pull the report also by school, academic institution. So we'll be able to see that. Again, it's based on academic data, and it's not a grouping of healthcare facility data and academic data. And then the ensuring fair and equitable access to clinical placement among approved schools of nursing, that actually was addressed by Lowe's bill last year. I think there was a portion of that was addressed. So we'll see how that happens with implementation this year. And then the identifying the necessary information, honestly, if you look at SB 1042 from last ledge session, that really has that necessary information. And HCI was brought in because they are the data collector for the state, right? They do an amazing job. BRN is not necessary a standalone data collector. We do contract with UCSF, but HCI really does a more global look. And so utilizing HCI to manage that data, and then we would just kind of pull reports and have our board present, was really something that our board believed was moving in the right direction and something that we could really benefit from. So with this, just understanding that, you know, as Carmen said, we do have a subcommittee right now that is formed that does look at clinical impaction. And this could be assigned to that subcommittee if that's something that you guys decide you think would be the best bet. We could divide it up if you're wanting to look at breaking that down into specific areas. So if you're looking at is the clinical education standards appropriate? So we're looking at the 500 hours. Well, maybe that section there goes to the simulation standards subcommittee, right? And then Sandra and Garrett take a look at that one. When we're looking at clinical placement and impaction, that goes to Joanne Spetz and was BBK, and that is now Judy Cornell. So we'll look at that. When we're looking at equitable placements, we can look at maybe diversity and pathway to nursing and see, and that would then fall within Jacqueline Brown. And I know that I think Jennifer is off, so that would be LaCandice that would fall into that role. So those are things that you guys could look at if you wanted to divide sections of this up to the various subcommittees that are already formed. That is definitely a possibility. But what needs to come is we need to have a timeline, which and have this information reported out through NEWAC to our board so that our board can write a report on this. And so that will take some time. And so the major work is going to happen in the subcommittees outside of our regularly noticed meetings. So that's where you'll get your kind of hands dirty, get into that, report that out through NEWAC at our next agendized committee, talking about the work that has been done, what you guys have found, and we'll just kind of continue that process through.
Thanks so much, Lori. So this is a big ask. There's a lot that was in Senate Bill 1015. So a couple things I'd like to just start out with, and let's talk about the concepts first before we start getting into the logistics. So just as an awareness, and full disclosure, health impact, and I did a webinar on December 13th last year for the California Community Colleges on clinical placement consortia and networks. And Executive Officer Melby was there and she spoke, as well as others from community colleges. This is a very complex phenomenon. Health Impact actually has been running the Bay Area Academic Practice Consortium since 2006. And we've had a very long history of that. And then I think in 2012, or maybe it was 2013, somewhere around there, we started the Los Angeles Academic Practice Consortium. We know that there are 8 different regional consortia already up and running in various parts of the state. Starting from the south, going north, there's the San Diego, and Lori was very involved with that consortium. We have the Orange County Long Beach Consortium. There's the Los Angeles Consortium. There used to be a Bakersfield, but they've disbanded. Then we have the Central San Joaquin Valley Consortium. We have the Bay Area Consortium. We have the Sacramento Area Consortium called SACANE. And then we have the Far North Consortium. The consortia are great and they really address major issues kind of that span the entire region, but those regions are very large. And so within each of the consortia, there are different local clinical placement networks. And so I think just as a general awareness for the committee, who may not have had a lot of history and exposure to consortia and networks, it's super complicated. And I would totally agree with Executive Officer Melby that things are decided in a region, and it can be even a small region. And so honoring and respecting what's happening within those small regions that they are managing situations. Just for example, in our academic Bay Area, because it's a Greater Bay Area Academic Practice Consortium, I know that Mendocino College has their own local network up in Lake County. It's Mendocino College happens to be in Lake County, so but they have their network up there, but they participate in a larger Greater Bay Area Academic Consortium. And so, this, I think I really applaud CNA for bringing this forward and putting it forward in a bill. And I'm really excited to, work on this issue. It's a super complex issue. And so I would like to open it up to other members of NEWAC to share your perspectives, thoughts, anything you'd like to add. I'm not sure if I can see everybody's hands, so let me just make sure.
I'm not seeing hands right now, but you guys don't have to obviously raise hands. You can just announce your name and come on. So I did see Hazel raise her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hazel.
You could definitely just unmute and say this is Hazel and start to speak, just for those who may not be able to see us on camera. They can still hear us audio.
Thank you. I was looking for the raise hand button. That's why I was looking down. But thank you. I agree that this is an important discussion, and yet complex and a little bit convoluted. I do want to sort of provide the perspective coming from the service side, or the side that participate or don't when it comes to certain consortia. So in our organization, we have agreements in place with the schools that we allow or we host within our hospitals or clinics or what have you. And this is legally the patients that are being seen by our hospital system or by our organization are our responsibility primarily. So we're making sure that whoever it is that touches them goes through the appropriate channels and the appropriate paths that our legal entities require. So one thing that we've noticed with some of the schools that may want to have relationships with us or may want to place students within our system is that, one, they might not always agree to the liability insurance or accountability that we ask of certain schools. And so that is one thing. The other thing is we also look at their pass rates, their all of the outcomes, if you would, of their schools, their matrices, their metrics. And then even in certain situations, just plain and simple, the responsiveness or of the faculty, of the school's administration, of the type of students themselves that we get. So for example, if we know we're expecting a cohort that is to start in October, we want to have their documents and everything at least a month ahead. And there are some schools that really wait until the very very last minute, they send it to us on a Saturday before the students come to us on Monday. So in those situations, we've had to, okay, well, we're going to revisit our agreement with the school and say, you know, we cannot continue to have this. And if you do, we may decide not to host any of your students any longer. So those are just a few, and just rattling off what comes to mind at this very moment. And you know, the idea of a consortium, whether it's statewide or even geographically with the same schools and service.
Back on that, I think one of the things when learning about these different consortia that are out there, they offer different items, right? Some of them offer on a very transparent website what each one of the facilities require. What are the requirements? They put their upfront documentation, like your HIPAA and your confidentiality documents, what your EMR is, whether or not you have an Omnis or a Pyxis, and any onboarding requirements for that. There are some consortia that have that right there on their homepage and says, if you're considering Kaiser NorCal, this is what is required to do clinicals there. And it makes the academic institution aware of all of the requirements prior to even reaching out to you for a potential contract for agreement. And so if the healthcare facility were to utilize some of the options that are there in consortia, they would be able to have that information out, and you would know that anybody that contacted you was willing to meet all of those requirements. So it would really be a benefit for you guys in processing through that. The benefit for the academic institution is they know what you need and they have access to the forms. They can get working on that right away, so that it's not turned into you at 5 o'clock on Sunday before they start clinicals Monday at 5 a.m., right? The other things that I think some people are not aware of that a consortia does is the consortia doesn't make the clinical decisions. The consortia doesn't decide who gets approved or who doesn't get approved. That is done through the healthcare agency. So what typically occurs in a very well-rounded consortium is academic institutions put bids in, and then they do a conflict resolution meeting between the academia institutions before it even reaches the healthcare entity. So if program director A and program director B both want the same clinical placement, they can look at their schedule and say, I'm willing to be there 2 weeks before that so my clinicals can end in time for you to start, if you can start 2 weeks later than what you originally planned. And then you work that into your curriculum, and those are typically done a year before you actually go out to clinicals, so that way students and theory instructors and clinical instructors kind of know what to expect for a schedule moving forward, right? So it's a very, very handy tool. Once they get through that conflict resolution meeting, that is when they send that information out to the healthcare facilities so that you guys get that information once all of those kind of bargainings and moving of dates and times and alignment has already occurred. So that way you guys are not the ones that have to do the, well, I think program A over program B because of this, right? You can actually see how it fits right into your schedule, and you can either just accept, or deny and put a reason, or propose a different option that might be something that you guys can fulfill. So I think what some people don't realize that the consortium is a data bank. Truly, it's not a item or a thing that schedules for people. So if you got standing relationships, that maintains it. It's just reported out through the consortium. The other thing that we've seen from BRN standpoint that becomes very helpful when using a very well-rounded consortium is you can click on a healthcare organization, and it pulls up a calendar, and that calendar shows that school A is there on Mondays and Wednesdays from 3 to 11, and school B is there on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 10. And Fridays are open, and so are Saturdays and Sundays, except for this, because they have a planned renovation happening on this unit in this time. So they block those days out. And so you can access the website. It's a secure login, and you can, as a member of that consortia, pull up a calendar that says, it looks like Fridays are clear. And I'm going to reach out to the healthcare institution and say, can my school utilize Fridays for this period of time? I've had a clinical loss, or I've been displaced temporarily because of a remodel or whatever. And so it becomes a scheduling tool, very much like you would see like on a doodle polls or anything like that, and not necessarily something that dictates where that goes. The other thing that has been really asked when we kind of met, and Garrett, you were part of this when we met with BCG, and kind of talked about that, was if the healthcare entities are utilizing similar items to meet a regulatory requirement or a federal CMS requirement or a Title 22, that maybe look at standardizing some of those documents as well. And you would know that if they were up and visible for everybody to look at. You guys might have all the same HIPAA forms. You might have all the same HIPAA training. You might have all the same, stuff like that. And so if you guys standard those as a healthcare agency, and I know you were talking about getting a standardized curriculum within academia, academia is also asking for standardized forms and onboarding and stuff within healthcare agencies too. So this is really just the beginning of a huge undertaking that will be done with NEWAC. And that's why I would recommend that it's not assigned to a single subcommittee. I would definitely recommend that this is kind of separated out to various subcommittees that are already formed. Maybe we refocus some of those subcommittees if need be, because of the workload that this is going to take to really get all that input and then bringing it back to NEWAC.
Thank you.
Garrett?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to put up my hand except to hold it up here and lose circulation.
No problem.
So a couple of things I want to reply to Lori. I'm in San Diego. We've been part of this consortium down here for a very long time, and it works very well. I would add, though, it does not cover every clinical site that schools use. That it being on the practice side of the consortium is, well, for all of us, it's totally optional. And so we've had some places that have been in the consortium a long time that decided not to be part of the consortium anymore for whatever reason. So it's not kind of a, you have to do it. It's if you want to participate. Otherwise, they put up some other process at their facility to do. So we have several sites that are not part of the consortium, and we work with them, with a relationship. And that's my other point, is that consortium is not just some spreadsheet that we all fill out. We have a committee that meets on a regular basis in San Diego. That's the Consortium Placement Committee. We're not even calling it consortium anymore. It's become a dirty word here, frankly. And so we're looking at, our practice partnerships here. And we meet, and it's so much of this is not about the spreadsheet or figuring out how we do it in Complio, or actually American Database got bots and that's somebody else. It's about relationships. And I think, to Hazel, to your point, we all take those relationships very seriously. And so if I have a student at a clinical site who's not doing well, or I've had HIPAA violations from students, and in that situation, I maintain the school's relationship with that site. I pull that student, they fail the class, and they have to petition to re-enter. So the site always sees that the schools are taking appropriate action to protect all of us when we have an incident with a student. So it's relationship based. I recently was removed from, all students were removed from a clinical site here last week for the duration of the semester. And we reached out to not consortium sites, but to those sites that we have relationships with that are not part of it. And we were able to manage for our students. So it's relationship based. The other thing that I just wanted to add is that I think to try to do this centralized, I think is fraught with many, 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 many obstacles. I'll just throw that out. And then the final thing I wanted to say is that we have MOUs that are negotiated with every clinical partner. I probably have over 100 MOUs. So those are always in place. They get reviewed on an annual basis. I would never, ever send a student anywhere unless I had a approved MOU with my contracts department and with the contracts department at the clinical site. So there's all of these things I think are in place. I would be, I mean, certainly down here, I would never, ever think about sending anybody information about students the week before clinical started. So perhaps it's regional, but I suspect that most of us that are in this game have a very set process. We have relationships with our clinical sites. We have MOUs in place. And, you know, for the most part, it works pretty well. So my thought would be if it's not parts where it's not broken, let's not try to fix it. And I'll close with that.
Agree, Wendy, and I want to make sure that that's perfectly clear. Is the consortium kind of statewide consortium kind of process that the board is looking at is data collection primarily, right? What you guys do with your relationships just gets reported out in a single format so that we have an awareness of what is done, so that when the board looks at growth, when we look at projecting workforce, when we look at the ability to have resources that don't displace currently approved programs, that's the data that the board and our state does not have. We do not have an idea of every single clinical placement. We do not know what's being used and what's not being used. We do not know dates and times. What we hear is information that comes from academic institutions saying, I lost a clinical placement. Information from an academic institution that says, I want to grow and I have resources. And then you have directors showing up in public comments saying, no, if you guys grow and use that resource, I lose it. So with our board being tasked to make these decisions, we need the data to make those decisions. We are not in any of the recommendations that we put out for the California state audits. When we met with Senator Roth, none of them were to dictate relationships and dictate approvals or not approvals. The one thing that we have in our law is the approval of clinical facilities. We do require contracts and MOU. So every academic institution that is using a clinical placement must meet that, or that doesn't get approved and they can't meet that. That's a process that is not broken. We would not be fixing that. When you're looking at the managing of a consortium from a centralized location, again, that is a data collection. That is not a person that is running it saying this region must do this and this region must do this. What we're asking for with a centralized location is that all of the data being collected is identical and reportable and something that is managed so that we can use like data to make these workforce predictions, to make these growth predictions, to be able to have a sustainable nursing workforce and pipeline. And that comes from having consistent data. And I know that Joanne can jump in at any point and talk about the importance of consistent data, which is why we've been using UCSF for years and years and years to have that consistent data. I know that Texas uses a statewide consortium. I know that Nevada uses a statewide consortium, again, not making the decisions. But I also know that Louisiana Board of Nursing does one more definite thing that I'm not, and I want to make that very clear, I am not recommending that our board does, And the Louisiana Board of Nursing actually makes all the clinical placements for their schools. That is not something that I would want. But that's to show that there are differences within every state board that talks about what they do, kind of education-based, program approval-based, et cetera. And what we're looking for here with what the NEWAC has been tasked to do is information gathering and recommendations to our board that we put forward to the legislators, because the legislators will be introducing bills based on this to create law. Those laws that may be introduced is that clinical placements don't happen unless it's done through a consortium. Well, then those healthcare entities that are doing placements outside of a consortium may now have a legal requirement to join. I don't know. That's a future possibility. It might say that consortiums are not required. You know, this is where you guys share this data, and this is where you guys put that information out so that our legislators have a better picture and a path forward on how to solve the problem. The one other thing that hasn't been touched on yet, which I think is very important, especially with the reintroduction of another bill this year from Assemblymember Flora, is out-of-state nursing programs. We have no ability right now to hold clinical placements for out-of-state nursing programs. Those out-of-state nursing programs are offering education to our in-state California residents. We find out sometimes at licensing that we have out-of-state nursing students doing clinicals in our state because the healthcare facilities aren't aware of that. They aren't aware of that law, that you cannot do clinicals in our state unless you attend a board-approved nursing program. We get that even from international programs. And so that is information that if, again, all of the clinical placements were done through a consortium, we'd be able to find that out and not find it out on application. When we get the application for a licensure and they say, oh, I went to clinicals here, here, here. And we're like, wait, you're not a board approved program. In fact, you're an international program. How did you do clinicals in San Bernardino? You know, what happened here? You know, so those are things. And then if a bill like the Flora bill does pass, which it does have a potential to do so, it sailed through unopposed last year and died in appropriations, we would have out-of-state nursing programs doing clinicals in our state that we would not have a good data bank to even be able to see what's happening there, which is why this is a huge issue, bigger than a regional focus that needs to have a statewide approach, because we are affecting Nevada, Idaho, Arizona, and such, because our California residents are now doing clinicals in those states because they're attending out-of-state programs. And I have EOs contacting me saying this is problematic because our population is so big compared to Idaho, right? So just to put that out as information just for you guys to kind of have in there and kind of absorb and look at this from a more global perspective, but include regional recommendations.
Wendy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to add that I'm a very data-driven decision maker. And I think that is certainly important that we do that. I would just ask that any decisions that are made regarding this as we go down this road are considering the fact of who's going to do this work. Because with the budget cuts in California right now, we're all being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. And it worries me when I hear about increasing regulations to do reporting. And so I think we just have to step into that very carefully. That's all.
Thank you. I want to open it up to other NEWAC members.
And Garrett, just want to let you know that I enabled the hand raise feature. So
oh, thank you. Okay, great.
bottom of their screen, they can raise their hands. So make it easier for you. Sorry.
Awesome. No, it's okay. Great. Thanks. Tanya, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I've been a member of the Sacramento SACAN It used to be Healthy Community Forums for over a decade now. And what I'm finding is it's now that most of our clinical agencies in the area are using a product called My Clinical Exchange to do their clinical placements and stuff. They don't want to sit at the Cmte meeting and talk about placements and doing that regional planning that we used to sit together and do. It's really changed away from that. We also used to sit there and look at standardized documents. And the big agencies that have a parent like out of the state or a parent that really makes the decisions are now saying, we don't want your regional document. We want to use our document. So a lot of the things that we used to get awesome work done at Cmte, making these decisions and making things very collaborative and everything else has gone by the wayside as the hospitals have got parent companies not participating and they're using software to do their planning. So it's becoming more and more difficult. We actually started having a conversation at our meeting on Monday of this week of what is the purpose of Cmte anymore, since we're not being able to do the things that we want to be doing with this group meeting. So I do think we have to look at what the purpose of these consortiums are and see, because if we can get this, we can also get better buy-in from our clinical agencies. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carmen, were you going to say something?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, from what Wendy and Tanya said, that's you're asking the right questions, which is what is working, what's not working with consortia, and what can we make in terms of recommendations that would be helpful for the BRN, whether that's regulation, whether that's guidance, whether it's data collection, that full range of the question about what is working with consortia, where are there issues, particularly like Tanya was saying, how can we ensure that there's appropriate participation when to be helpful for the regions that are trying to manage their clinical placements. And I think, NEWAC is a perfect place to do this, since we have schools, we have sites, we have we have labor represented in NEWAC, and it's a big task, but I think those of us in NEWAC, we can take it on, and I think we need to start. These are the big questions that we really are trying to answer, which is like how can we get through this question of clinical impaction and making sure that schools are able to get the clinical sites that they need and that they're managed appropriately, and making those recommendations. So I think this is a good start to the conversation is and what we wanted.
Excellent. I just wanted to mention, because I said that we run the LA Academic Practice Consortium, which is not it is partially placement, but a lot of it is really what are the issues that are being that arise in that particular area. And we have a strategic plan, a 3-year strategic plan, where we're looking at 3 strategic priorities. 1 is clinical placements, 2 is curriculum, because there's a lot going on right now in curriculum, and there's actually a widening academic practice gap or practice readiness gap. And so how we are going to come together and try to figure that piece out. And then the third is creating more academic practice partnerships, and what does that actually mean and what does that actually look like. And so the LA consortium, which is a very large consortium, it's geographically as well as number of people, really looking at these things to try to reduce barriers and challenges. And we don't think that it's actually solely within the Los Angeles region. I think that to a lot of EOMLB's points, that we're actually trying to address these issues like transparency around onboarding requirements and what can be accepted, across different clinical agencies. So all really important and things that we need to think about. And if I don't see any other hands from the NEWAC members, Reza, I just want to double check. Can I go to public comment before we go to a motion, or must I go to a motion first?
Either way, you have the flexibility as long as it occurs before the committee takes action.
Okay.
If it is taken on a motion.
Okay, I think what I'd like to do is have public comment open now because I think having the public give their input can help us understand how to like navigate through this. So, Mark, can you open up for a public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. You can also raise your hand if you see that option available. I see Connie LaFuente has figured it out. So Connie LaFuente would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Okay, hi everybody. Connie Lafuente from the San Diego Imperial Region. And I just wanted to share with you that I help coordinate all the meetings for the San Diego Nursing and Allied Health Service Education Consortium in San Diego. And the collaboration is working really well. There's a lot of work to be done. And we have been very successful because as part of the leadership team, we have not only health facilities at the table, but also private, public, community colleges and universities and four-year universities. So we meet regularly. We have established guidelines. We have established a calendar, and we're working together to be able to streamline processes to resolve conflict resolution when those conflicts occur. So we basically just provide the platform for different educational entities to come and try to work things out before they go into the health facilities, because we're trying to make it easy for the health facilities not to have to deal with a lot of that stuff. So it's working well. We continue to move forward. Our next priorities are to develop guidelines, and something that came out of the consortium as well is that the agencies in San Diego, they want to have their own meeting and they want to collaborate and work together. So the consortium is working really well in San Diego. And definitely, I agree with Loretta, there is a great need for data. So if there is a way we can collaborate to get that data, that would be great. Um, and if you would like to meet with us at the consortium, the general meetings meet quarterly, and the leadership meetings take place monthly. So you're welcome to come and attend to one of our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie LaFuente. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Chan, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. We still have no representation in person in our location in Sacramento. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. So as I'm reviewing the language from Senate Bill 1015, one of the things that I am kind of gathering is that, and I want to check this out with everybody, and feel free to push back if you disagree, which is totally fine. That there are some subsections of the bill that really require us to do an environmental scan and understand what's actually happening. And then I think there might be a second step, which are kind of recommendations. So if I'm to look at the language of the bill, I look at letters A, B, D, and E as being kind of what's going on out in the world. So A is how approved schools of nursing or nursing programs maintain clinical education standards. B is the participation of approved schools of nursing or nursing programs in consortiums with other approved schools of nursing or nursing programs to manage or coordinate clinical placements. D is identifying and reporting violations of section 2786.4, which is paying for clinical placements. And E, ensuring fair and equitable access to clinical placement among approved schools of nursing or nursing programs. And I'm just going to propose this, and I want again people to comment and push back if you so wish to, which is totally fine. I think we need to answer some of these questions first before we actually get to C and F. The necessity and feasibility of a statewide consortium or regional consortiums under regulatory oversight, because I don't think we know enough yet in order for us to make a recommendation on C. And I don't know if we know enough yet about recommendation F, or excuse me, letter F, which is identifying necessary information for the board to collect. I wanted to see if that sounds about right, because our first kind of pass at trying to study this, we may want to focus on A, B, D, and E first, before we get to C and F. But again, I'm welcoming people to provide an alternative perspective. That sounds about right. Carmen, I mean, you're a representative from CNA. I mean, I don't know how CNA would feel about us focusing on A, B, D, and E first before we get to C and F.
No, I agree that that's generally how we structured this, which is we need to study the issue and then make recommendations. So that delineation makes sense. D is kind of like a little bit could be either, right? Because it's
Sure.
already law. You know, at least the information gathering parts make sense before we have the discussion of uh the CNF, which are the recommendations.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure because, I know this was a CNA bill and I don't want to go against what CNA wants, but I think just kind of getting a better sense of what's going on. And I think that by doing that, it helps us kind of focus on what we need to collect, and then we can come together and have a conversation about that. So, yes, Judy, please.
Yeah, I think there has to be some structure around it. So I think that's the right track to go, what you're proposing. Not just, we can't even collect data until we have some uniformity around what is the actual data that is needed so we don't overburden anyone around, what needs to be submitted, but yet still have the right information available so that when the board goes to make decisions, they have transparent and adequate data. And I think the whole feasibility of all of these different consortiums are doing great work with very limited resources. And so the burden on those consortiums and how that may or may not detract from the work that they're doing because of the resources available to them. Not only that, but also the resources available to the board for being able to maintain that data. So I just think there's a lot of structural things in place. It's a great idea, and I think it'll come to fruition, but it'll create a lot of chaos if we can't get some structure put down first.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very sound advice, as always. Um, so, with both the blessing from CNA, but also the cautions from Judy, uh, uh, I'd like to kind of figure out how to um, get this work done. Um, a little bit, and I realize I probably should have reordered the agenda to have actually the subcommittees report out. Because now it's like we have subcommittees who haven't reported out of what they have been doing, and now we actually may give them additional work. So um, I realized perhaps I should have reordered the agenda, but let's take each one of these kind of uh, trying to figure out how to do this the best way. So, um, let's just take a look at letter A for just a minute here. How approved schools of nursing or nursing programs maintain clinical education and standards. I'm just curious if any of the subcommittees that are currently um, constituted are is already looking at this topic, or potentially could include it in the continued work of that particular subcommittee. just a brief, sorry, let me just briefly tell the public what subcommittees we have. So we have a simulation standards subcommittee, although we did all of our work, we're just waiting to see what happens next. The clinical placement and impaction, that is Joanne Spetz and Barbara Barney Knox, and it may be, Judy, should that be something that you're interested in. There's the Cultural Competency Diversity Pathway to Nursing, and that's Dr. Roman, and it was Jennifer Zhangma, but Jennifer has stepped down from this committee, so we'll have to figure out what to do to replace her. We have a theory practice gap and new grad orientation that is led by Kathy Hughes and Wendy Hansborough. We have a workforce retention group, which is Hazel Torres and Carmen Comsty. We have a curriculum standards and guidelines group that is headed up by Janine Graves and Sajid Guzman. And we have a faculty subcommittee, which is led by Tanya Altman and Tammy Vantal. So if we look at letter A here, is there something that one of the current subcommittees could actually take on? Just double check to see. Yes, Hazel, I see your hand.
Yes, Garrett, could you state again which we're going to prioritize first? I have A, B, and F.
D
Is
and
that
E. A, B, D, and E.
B, D, and E. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems, Garrett, that this item would go into the clinical placement subcommittee potentially. But, we're not fully staffed as a subcommittee, or, we don't have a full subcommittee anymore. I'm it. So, I think there's plenty of room for discussion on that one about whether that's the right place for it to be, and does that, and kind of what that subcommittee's work is going to be. I missed the last meeting, so I'm feeling a little behind on what that subcommittee's current work is supposed to be.
And it would be dependent on you. So you will decide what the committee's work will be. So yeah, and this could be one of them. So let's hold that for now with your subcommittee, and we can make a change. But let's move on to B. So the participation of approved schools of nursing or nursing programs and consortia with other approved schools of nursing programs to manage and coordinate clinical placements. And we heard from two different consortia in California, SACANE, which is in the Sacramento area. We also heard from San Diego, both from Connie LaFuente and from Wendy Hansborough, as well as E.O. Melby, who was part of that consortium. So any subcommittee think that B might be able to fit into your scope of work?
Garrett, I need to ask a stupid question.
No stupid question ever.
I'm using the link that was in the agenda,
Okay.
and I don't know that I'm reading the same thing that you are referring to. So I'd like clarification on that.
I'm sorry. I will look at the link. I haven't clicked on the link. I'm just looking at the agenda information sheet for agenda item 5.0.
Okay.
Do you have the meeting materials?
I do. I have those up, but then I clicked on the link to take me to the bill, and I'm like, I really lost now. I don't know what you're talking about.
So there's a link on there that takes you to the business professions code. It's
Right, that's where I'm at.
It's a long business professions code. So
Yes,
what
it
you'll want
is.
to do is scroll down to the very bottom to
Okay.
H1.
Okay. Because
Are you
he's
able to
referring
see
to,
that now?
okay, so you're referring to H, A
Yes.
through F.
H1, A through F. And then
Okay.
2A
Thank you.
is the report.
I had not scrolled down that far.
No problem.
Got it. I'm good.
So,
So A is I mean, that's such a, I look at that, how approved schools of nursing or nursing programs maintain clinical education standards.
That could also fall within Janine Graves and Saji de Guzman because they're looking at curriculum standards and guidelines as well. So A could actually fall within Saji and Janine's work group, or we were thinking it might fall within Joanne's work group, or I'm sorry, not work group, subcommittee. Subcommittee is what I meant to say.
I don't know if Jane is here, but yes, that I think that's gonna fall on curriculum standards too.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, Saji. So were you saying which letter were you referring to?
That's letter A. So I was waiting for Janine if she will. She's my team lead, so I was waiting for her if she's.
I've been
Janine.
listening.
All right. So yeah, so I know that it will fall on our curriculum standards. So if you agree, then let me know.
Of course, Saji.
So letter A for Saji and Janine. Okay, great. Letter B seems more in Joanne's subcommittee. It seems like it fits better there. Joanne. And again, you and BBK may have not set your agenda, so this might be the agenda
We did
item
not.
that you will answer.
Yes, this would be, yeah, that would be something that that could fit into that subcommittee's work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then typically, because Judy did replace BBK as a direct kind of swap out, same focus, she would replace BBK in that subcommittee as well. We just haven't updated our website yet to reflect that.
Okay. Letter D, let's come back to D for just a second. Let's go to E first. Ensuring fair and equitable access to clinical placement among approved schools of nursing or nursing programs. I'm just curious. Tanya and Tammy and the faculty subcommittee, have you decided on what you're going to be working on?
Oh, we were working on a survey for faculty as far as the shortage areas.
Okay. 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 Do you think
it may also still live within Joanne and Judy Cornell's because it is still very clinical based. And if you're looking at the consortium that might lay very well within that, when you're looking at B and E, that might be something that helps to ensure that. Just
okay.
thinking kind of out loud for you guys.
Judy?
Yeah, as I look at this, I get the equitable access. I'm not sure what is meant by that. So ensuring fair and equitable access, and by ensuring, what does that mean? I mean, we don't have the power to tell people yes or no, right? This isn't us saying us or even advice to the BRN that they be the people to say, oh yes, you can have your clinical placement there, or no, you can't. So I guess I'm a little unclear as to the language in the regulation, and what the intent behind that is. Maybe CNA can elucidate on that.
Yeah, sure, Judy. The primary issue with that with E is really to look at the implications for different schools not having access to clinical education and clinical placements. Primarily the issues that do stem from, the reason why it's listed in this order is that, we hear from from schools that, they aren't able to get placements, but certain schools are. So like there's a issue of both equity in terms of which schools are getting placed in terms of the type of school, and then both there's an issue of whether or not there are unsaid standards that sites may that may have in terms of uh, prioritizing one school over another, one program over another. So there's a question of are there, what is happening where schools are not actually being able um, uh, to get their placements, and why is that happening? I think a good example of what fairness could be, which could be is a program having to send their students hours away for a clinical site rather than to a local site. So those are kind of the things that are we wanted folks to consider in terms of what is actually happening right now, because I think we don't have a good sense of what are the discrepancies in terms of the clinical sites that each school has. And I one of the questions that we need to study is, can we actually get that information, or is that something that we have to look for in terms of getting that information to understand who's getting which clinical sites? And the response might be like, it's right now we can't actually get that information.
Okay,
One
so
thing
what
I want to add in really quick for consideration was the passing of AB 1577 last year. So when AB 1577 passed with Lowe, talking about health facilities and clinicals and clinics and clinical placement nursing, what that does now is requires a health facility or clinic to meet with our California community colleges and California state universities and work in good faith to meet the needs of the pre-licensure nursing clinical placement needs of the California community colleges and the CSUs, including, additional clinical placement slots. And so there now is that requirement out there in law that is done, but down at the very bottom of that is F, which calls out the Board of Registered Nursing. And it says any attempt to identify additional clinical placements by the Board of Registered Nursing, a health facility, or clinical pursuant to this section shall not supplant or disrupt the clinical placements of any nursing student for whom a clinical placement is already in progress, has already been scheduled, or is under agreement for future use by an approved school of nursing or approved nursing program. And that statement lies there, the implication that we would know that these were already approved, that they're already under agreement, that they're already there, and we don't, right? So that is part of the law that we have to figure out how to get into place. And so the statement that says, we might be able to get this information, but could the board have any true input on that? Yes, we do. And we're actually mandated to do that when we're looking at clinical placements. In our current business professions code, sorry, not the California Code of Regulations, the schools have an active role in that as well. And so the clinical facilities approval process in 1427 says that as the board, we can't approve any clinical placement usage that doesn't meet your clinical objectives and doesn't have, like these contract requirements. But it calls out that the school must, in selecting a new clinical agency or facility for student placement, the program shall take into consideration the impact that an additional group of students would have on students of other nursing programs already assigned to that agency or facility. That's one clinical group. And so that's where the academic institutions have to really say, I need to know what other schools are using this clinical facility, what dates and times they're there, And if I'm going to add one additional clinical group of potentially 6 students, what kind of an impact does that have? They then report that to us so that we have an idea of it before we approve the use of that clinical placement. So it does put the board in a very kind of important role in ensuring that there is equity. The other one where that comes into play is in looking at new campus and new program growth. And we have a document on our website that is referenced in reg called the EDP IL1. And there's a statement in that that they have to report out to us as well for our board to consider, where it talks about that they have to, and I'll read the direct quote so I don't say it incorrectly, but it states that clinical placements of a new program must take into consideration the impact on the use of the clinical facility by existing pre-licensure registered nursing programs and must be coordinated with any process for clinical placement, such as consortiums for regional planning. Include a description of the collaboration and coordination efforts with any existing registered nursing program and any regional planning consortium. So that's part of our law. There's a document that is referenced in that form as well, called the facility verification form. And on the bottom of that, it specifically says, provide the following information on all other schools utilizing your facility. So when you go to Hospital Z and you say, hey, I'm interested in having a contract with you, I want to grow my program, I'm going to turn this information into the board. That facility must tell you what schools they're contracted with and are using clinical sites, whether they're RN, LVNs, or CNAs, et cetera. The number of students, the days and hours those students are there, whether it's semesters, fall, spring, summer, et cetera, and what units are used. And then they turn that into us, and that's part of their feasibility study that must be approved by our board before they can have a new campus location or a new program. And so just so you guys are completely aware, this is information that's already required in law to be reported up to us. And this is information that our board is already required to utilize to make these decisions. And so that is something that we do have to keep in the back of our mind when we're looking at these equitable placements. Is NEWAC has a role to kind of tell us a path on how to get to the equitable placements, but the board has laws that require us to ensure equitable placements. We need to ensure that the programs that are already approved, that already have students in them, are able to progress and graduate. That is where we come in as under the Department of Consumer Affairs to look at consumer protection. Your student that is enrolled in your nursing program is our consumer. And when you enroll to a 4-year program that starts in 2025, our job as a consumer protecting agency is to ensure that if you roll in 2025, you've got adequate theory, clinical placements, resources, including faculty, to be able to complete that 4 years later in 2029. And we have to somehow predict that that's going to happen and ensure that that happens by taking all this information into consideration before we allow for growth in a region or a school or something. And that is our consumer protection role. So we do need to have this information. It does need to be reported up to us, and we play an active role in that equitable placement because that is our consumer protection.
Judy, thank you, Lori, for that. It was very important. I think part of the work that you might do is actually help us define what that is. So I guess what I would say is we can help figure out what if there is a legal definition somewhere, but I think we actually don't really know what it is. And so part of your environmental scan is to actually figure out what does equitable access look like. I mean, in my prior role before Health Impact, I was the director of the Center for Education and Professional Development at Stanford Healthcare, and I was dealing with the same things that Hazel was dealing with, where there were some schools where the faculty would never step foot into our facility, ever. And we actually couldn't ever get a hold of anybody when there were issues. And as the director of that health system, I had to make a decision whether I was going to continue a contract or not, because it was unsafe for everybody all around. And so yes, that would be problematic, I think, today, but it's actually in the service of the student and my own patients in my own health system. I needed to make sure that I had access to faculty and that they were responsive. Um, and so I think there's some navigating through all of this that we're going to have to explore and somewhat define as we continue to move forward, unless there's a legal definition. And so Lori or Reza can provide us a legal definition. But if we don't have one, we need to start at least
Developing.
exploring what the concept is.
Yeah, I think as we explore the concept, we'll look to see if we have legal definitions that align. One of the examples that you brought up right here is you had to cancel a clinical site because you couldn't have communication. That should have been reported to the Board of Registered Nursing on that, because they would have been in violation of California Code of Regulations 16 CCR 1427 3 and as well as 5, C3 and 5, where it says a specification of the responsibilities and authority of the facility staff as related to the program and to the educational experience of students. So you have that. And then provisions for continuing communication between faculty, facility, and the program. And then a description of the responsibility of faculty assigned to the facilities used by that program, right? We have very specific guidelines that says, you as an academic institution must do this. And when you guys are experiencing as a healthcare agency an issue, they may actually not be in compliance with our rules and regulations, which means that would have to come to us. We would have to look at it as a board, and we would hold the school in a form of non-compliance until they fixed that. And so as you guys look and do that environmental scan and you say, I believe it makes up this, and this, when you bring that forward to us and we work with you at the BRN within your subcommittees, I can point you to the legal authority that we have with that, or I could point you and say, we don't have legal authority for that. That is actually something you might want to highlight because we have no jurisdiction over that. And that's something that you guys are experiencing. But that is going to come as Garrett, as you're kind of suggesting, as you learn and do that environmental scan and come up with a definition of what you think each one of these requirements are. When you guys are talking and experiencing the issues and challenges that you're facing, then we can tell you whether or not we have any legal authority over it, or if that's something that is outside of our jurisdiction.
That's awesome. Awesome, Lori. Thank you. One thing I would actually like to add to your group, is letter D. So if you're talking with all of these people, we probably should also find out if there are any, you can identify any violations to the pay for clinical placements. I think that makes sense. And so maybe that D kind of straddles two camps, if you will, the kind of exploratory environmental scan, what's going on, and then also making some recommendations in the recommendations phase. So
then
that's
Garrett,
kind of how,
like
that's how I was thinking about it. I'm sorry, somebody was
it
saying
looks like
something.
Tanya's got her hand
Oh, I'm
up.
sorry, Tanya.
Tanya
Please,
Altman.
Tanya. Mhm. I'm sorry, Tanya. Go ahead, please.
It might have just been pulled down. It was
Okay.
up. Nope, it's
Well, Tanya
still showing up, and it's showing that she's muted. So
Oh.
she would have to unmute and then Janine has her hand up as well.
Thank
Tanya,
you.
if you're on a, sorry, Janine.
Go ahead.
Tanya, if you're on a computer, I've sent you the request to unmute. It's a small box, so if you have any windows open, there you go.
I need to be elevated back to participant because I got kicked
Oh,
out of my computer, so I'm
oh,
in
oh, I'm
attendees.
sorry.
Um,
Sorry. Okay, now you're back.
Except she's muted again, so she needs
Oh,
to unmute
yeah,
now that she's been moved back to panelist. She should have control of that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. I have been listening since I got my computer back going. One of the things to consider about access is looking at whether the hospital is trying for magnet status as well, because they may preferentially choose certain programs for that. So
Got
it's a
it.
little out of order, but sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that.
Are you suggesting, if I may, are you suggesting that they might prefer BSN over ADN programs?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
That is something that's reported commonly, and I think that's a educational opportunity as well to our healthcare facilities on the BSN requirement is for managerial status for magnet and not bedside nursing status. And a lot of people that are pursuing magnet or continuing with magnet have a misunderstanding that 80% BSN is throughout their entire nursing workforce. And that is actually inaccurate. It's only for managers and above.
And I would call upon if the California Hospital Association is listening, I would call for actual data because there's a lot of, anecdotal information. And so I think getting some hard data would be very important here. So,
I did
um,
see Cherie in attendance, so
okay,
she
great. So I'm
wants to
calling out
raise her
Cherie
hand.
Lowe. So, all right.
If she wants to
But
raise
let
her
me
hand and
go.
join in, she's absolutely welcome to do so.
Yes. Janine, go ahead. You're next. And then we'll go to LaCandace.
Thank you, Garrett. I was just wondering if Reza has any kind of an opinion about the money part of it, because that seems more in his lane, paying for clinical placement than it does in a clinical regulatory. I just would like him to do a scan to see if that crosses the line. And if DCA doesn't have any, I don't know, barbers do that. I know there's a lot of things that go under DCA. And I'm just wondering if those attorneys could look at that and see if there's any precedent for placement of any type of student. You have cosmetology, you have all kinds of things. And there may have already been some decisions or statements or regulations surrounding that we in the board of nursing do not know about.
So can I get a little more clarification on the ask?
Of course.
I'm not sure. I'm not aware at this moment. I'm happy to look into anything you'd like. I'm not currently aware of other boards, and there may be that have something similar where they're licensees in order to get educated to become licensed, require clinicals, and that there is that impaction issue, and then the similar kind of prohibition that we have in 2786.4. BRN does have, its separate enforcement division that its focus is on RN licensees. So there hasn't been a lot of attention from within the enforcement division on enforcing the quote pay to play
Right.
thing. I don't even think we had language in statute specifically prohibiting that was clearly explicitly prohibitive until what was it, maybe
3 years ago, it was our son's
2-3 years ago. And so since that time it's kind of just been, if there were a complaint, the BRN would kind of manage it as at this point, case by case type of.
What we've done to date is reach out to other entities for some insight and support. One of them being like BPPE, our Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education. We have an MOU with them within BRN. They typically investigate and look at the approval status of the academic institution itself, where the Board of Registered Nursing is only focused on the nursing program within that academic institution. There's a lot of kind of, again, misinformation, misunderstanding of, they call it dual oversight, and it's and they believe that sometimes we're duplicative, and that's again not accurate. So just like we have the community colleges chancellor's office, the CSU's chancellor's office, and BPPE, they look at the academic institution themselves, and then we look at the nursing program. And so when we're looking at budgetary issues, say if they're actually doing a actual pay to play and it comes out and it shows within their budget and stuff, that would actually be investigated through the MOU that we have with BPPE, or it would go to possibly the chancellor's office for CSUs or community colleges to look at that academic issue, because it would be less of a nursing program issue typically and more of a academic institution issue. The other thing that many people may not be aware of is within the state of California, boards and bureaus under DCA, the nursing program approval is fairly unique to BVNPT and BRN. And so like vet med, barbering and cosmetology, they do look at their programs and they value, but they may not have as much authority as we do. We may not align with what you guys would expect within the other DCA boards and bureaus, but where we do align is within the other boards of registered nursing throughout the nation. And so nursing, as you guys know, is kind of a different entity than some of the other healing art boards and such that you might be familiar with. And so there is a different kind of oversight responsibility done to that. And again, different from state to state as well. So when you're trying to find like for like, you're probably not going to find that easily. But when you're looking at what's in front of us here as identifying and reporting violations of section 2786.4, that to me really just says, you know, kind of exploring that process of how do you get people to report? How do you identify that this is occurring? And it looks to me to be more kind of knowledge-based education stuff that we would get out to our academic partners as well as our healthcare facility partners, because that is where the identifying and reporting has to happen, right? We do the investigation at the board side once it's given to us, and we have specific procedures that we do to follow that. But right now, we're not getting a lot of that identifying occurring because of how difficult it is to determine it's happening. And then we're also not getting the reporting that is required. There may be some consideration in looking at a reporting requirement, right? We do have within BV and PT that employers must report their LVNs or psych techs if they do an error. We don't have anything similar to that with BRN. The employers do not have to report if an RN does an error. But there are laws that can be looked at that, and that might be something that is in there that if you see this, maybe that is something that needs to be added to say you must report, because I think sometimes people are hesitant to do the actual reporting based on a risk management assessment or legal counsel recommendation at the healthcare facility level or academic institution level.
What I would like to, I want to be attentive to time because we do have a guest speaker. I'd like to take LaCandace and Kathy's comments and then move towards kind of the action plan. So LaCandace, please.
Thank you, Chair Chan. I just have a curious question. Don't necessarily need an answer today, but I'm trying to understand, is this committee only going to be looking at clinical placements in hospitals. I ask because community college students do clinical placements in other settings other than hospitals, but I've only heard conversations today about hospitals. And so if we're looking at other clinical placement locations, what would those locations be? And then is there any coordination we need to do with other entities in the state that are responsible for those areas? I'm thinking about community health centers, skilled nursing facilities, those types of places. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment, and that would be absolutely part of the entire scope of what to look at. Many of our folks who are here, I'm going to say Hazel Torres is ambulatory. That's her area of expertise. Judy is over the corrections system. So not just hospitals, but it's a great comment and something to get, of course, keep in front of mind. Thank you for that. Kathy, please.
So I think just a comment, maybe a question for Reza that can be answered at later at, looking at time, but I think it's hard to report violations because as Melby mentioned much earlier, it's difficult to prove whether or not there's been a violation. We know that pay to play is still happening. They've become very clever in that they're doing, endowments and donations and sitting on the boards and things like that. So I think looking at conflicts of interest and then looking at whether or not that coordinates with clinical placements. And so someone from a particular school is made a huge donation, and then coincidentally their students get lots of clinical placements, bumping other schools, especially public schools, things like that. I know that's one of the things our union is looking at. And so being able to kind of connect the dots, even though, you wouldn't necessarily be able to prove a violation, it's pretty much implied. So looking at kind of like the conflict of interest, it wouldn't necessarily prove a violation, but maybe be a public interest, that, something that as a union, we would put that out there. Hey, look at this. This is a problem, that kind of thing. And just looking at it from that perspective, because I think there's things that you can look at and say, this is problematic. But I just kind of thinking about it from a different angle and possibly that conflict of interest, knowing that people have become very clever on how to still pay to play. Thanks.
Thanks,
So,
Kathy.
Garrett, I have one question.
Yeah.
That it concerns me that we would be drawing conclusions or implying that there is wrongdoing or pay to play or something like that. I don't know that is our prerogative here.
So this is Reza. I'll jump in. I think that there's a couple things that are clear. Currently, we have language that says institutions shall not do this, pay to play and get clinical placements. It is definitely true, as has been said, it's a tricky issue. Folks are clever and try to structure things in a way that makes it not obvious. And so it is definitely a challenge. And I'll just reiterate what I said. We've only had this language that's explicit about prohibiting this type of arrangement for a few years. So it's not like the BRN has been in the business of enforcing that for a long time. So it may be that we need to kind of develop even the statutory framework further. I agree with the last comment that we have to be careful about making definitive statements based on less than concrete information about wrongdoing. But that's where I think, getting back to the comment before that, in my mind, the way I kind of see it is it is kind of a quasi enforcement function of the BRN to enforce this provision. So I imagine, I mentioned earlier the enforcement side that deals with enforcement against RN licensees. Similarly, I can kind of contemplate a similar structure where representatives of schools or other stakeholders out there can make a complaint to the BRN that says, hey, this school has done this, and that would very much appear to be a violation, or it strongly resembles a pay-to-play situation. And then the BRN, just like it does in any other case, there's kind of a burden of proof to meet. Now, that's currently not, spelled out in statute. As I said, maybe there's some further fleshing out that could be done. But the BRN doesn't take a complaint necessarily, at face value and assume, the ultimate conclusion. It conducts further investigation and gathers facts to corroborate the complaint. In this context, again, it could be a little bit tricky to do that, but sometimes, I think that the most important thing is going after the most egregious situations where it's going to be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more obvious, but ultimately it's going to be kind of a fact intensive situation that the BRN has to gather facts and look into, and then kind of look at how do we go about enforcing it. Is it taking action against the school through the continued approval process, or what does that look like? These so as far as the role of the committee, I think there's still a lot of input and brainstorming is what I kind of envision that the committee members doing in response to this item as well, where there's a lot of legal questions, but definitely just important viewpoints from you all as far as who might report this and what are the thought processes and the considerations and things that go into them bringing that information forward to the BRN and things like that. So that's where I think the committee can get some of that, and I, for one, and I'm sure other staff are happy to work with whoever's working on that piece.
Thanks, Reza. One of the things I'm going to ask that you do is meet with Joanne and with Judy offline as they're getting their work together to help give them some guidance in this area. Judy, I see your hand up, but I really want to, is it a quick comment because we do need to move forward?
It is. I have a hard stop. I have a meeting that begins promptly at 1 o'clock. And so unfortunately I'll have to jump off.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we have gone through a lot. We've had a lot of great discussion. We will take notes. We've taken notes. Hopefully, I know Joanne and both Judy had to jump off, but I'd like to make a motion that the first phase of work to meet the mandates of Senate Bill 1015 include the sorry, let me get the name of this correctly here. The Clinical Placement and Impaction Subcommittee that is co-chaired by Joanne Spetz and Judy look at subsections, let's see, sorry. And I didn't write this down correctly.
I believe it was B and E.
B and E.
Then that A was going to go to curriculum.
Yes, curriculum, right. So Joanne and Judy are going to look at B. Actually, I'm going to have them look at D and E and have that beginning conversation with Reza so that he can figure out how to help them navigate through that. And again, to start the we may not end up with the final answer, but actually having those conversations in their in their meetings. And then for the subcommittee for Saji and Janine, the curriculum standards and guidelines are going to be A, subsection A.
Okay. So the first one was B, D, and E,
E, uh-huh.
and then A for curriculum.
Yes.
Perfect.
I think I need a second.
Yep.
May I get a second?
I second Hazel.
Thanks, Hazel. Okay, great. All right. So
you had already gone out to public comment, so you don't need to go again, but you can choose to do that. If you decide not to do it, then you would just go into roll call vote at this point.
I think again, we're running out of time. We have an hour left, and we have 3 more agenda items. So, what I would say to the public is please connect with Dr. Joanne Spetz or to Judy. Sorry, Judy's last name is Cornell. To Sajida Guzman and to Janine Graves, if you have any additional information that you would like to share with them. So that, and if you want to send an email, I guess it would be to brn.newac. So the email to send the messages to would be brn.newac@dca.ca.gov. Now, members of this committee may not message these folks, otherwise we get into trouble. So through Bagley Keene, but anybody in the public who would like to reach out to those 4 individuals may do so again by sending an email to brn.newac@dca.ca.gov. And I actually think that the email is on, or you can send an email to Macaulay I'm sorry, Macaulay. I always get your last name wrong. Help me, Lori. Fusarins. And her contact information is also on the agenda item summary. You can also send an email there and she will make sure that it goes to the right person. So with that, I'm going to do a roll call for approval of my motion. So Garrett Chan says yes. Janine Graves?
Yes.
Thank you, Janine. Tanya Altman?
Altman, yes.
Thanks, Altman. Tammy Ventel?
Yes.
Thank you, Tammy. LaCandice Ochoa?
Yes.
Thank you, LaCandice. Wendy Hansborough?
Yes.
Thank you, Wendy. Saji de Guzman?
Saji, yes.
Thank you, Saji. Alice Benjamin is absent. Hazel Torres?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hazel. Judy Cornell is not on the call any longer. Kathy Hughes?
Kathy Hughes, yes.
Thanks, Kathy. Jacqueline Bowman? Let's see. Is Jacqueline still with us?
Jacqueline never joined this morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Carmen Comsty?
Yes.
Thank you, Carmen. Joanne Spetz also stopped off, and Sandra Miller. Is Sandra still with us?
I still keep getting on mute. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Sandra.
I'm trying to be too quiet over here.
No, it's all good. Thank you. I think I have a majority vote, correct? Okay. All right, thank you. The motion passes. I want to thank the committee and the public for your great, robust conversation. We will continue to move forward. I'm going to move to item 6.0, discussion and possible action. So report from the 7 NEWAC subcommittees. And so I'm going to go in order.
Garrett, I was going to interrupt really quick. Do you
Yeah,
want to reorder and take Nancy Spector's out of order and do 7.0 before we do to a report out?
Yes,
Or
thank you. Yes, that's
I
a
know
good
you had
idea.
mentioned, so we could reorder at this point.
Thank you. So, by prerogative of the chair, I'm going to reorder the agenda, and we're going to go to let's see, if I scroll
7.0.
7.0. And this is a presentation from the National Council of State Boards of Nursing on the Pre-Licensure Annual Report Core Data Survey. So we are so thrilled to have Dr. Nancy Spector from the National Council of State Boards of Nursing come and give us a presentation. For the public, you can find her PowerPoint presentation in the supplemental materials. Dr. Spector and I know each other very well. We've been on several committees, and we're actually on a PhD committee together for a doctoral student. And so it's been on, I see Alice Benjamin is on. Hello,
Yes.
Alice.
Hi, sorry, I joined late. I'm new to the committee and I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't unmute myself. So sorry, I just wanted
I'm
to
so
let you know I was
sorry.
here. Okay.
My apologies. Well, we're thrilled that you're here, and thank you so much for being with us, and welcome to the NEWAC committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Spector, we would love to have you elevated, and it's great to see you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. And I believe you have the PowerPoints for me, somebody there. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I have to say, your meeting has been so excellent. I wanted to chime in about 15 times. You're talking about things that are nationally talked about all the time. Excellent meeting, so thank you. This supposedly will take about 20 minutes, and please feel free to ask questions either during or at the end, because, you know, I think some interactiveness with this can be really important. So next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about is first discuss the annual report program, and very briefly, because I only have 20 minutes, I will be talking about where it came from in the first place, and then how it benefits not only the educators, but also the boards of nursing. So next slides, please. Slide, please. The background. You might be wondering, sometimes educators wonder, why is NCSBN or why are regulators talking about evidence-based quality indicators of nursing education programs? Shouldn't that be done by the nursing education group? So next slide, please. And this is why. Our board of directors requested or really directed us to develop quality indicators for the regulators, the boards of nursing to use. And remember, every state regulates nursing education programs. There's only one state that doesn't, and that is Utah. In 2 states, New York and Mississippi, it's done by the Board of Higher Education, but in collaboration with the Board of Nursing. So this is a major issue that boards deal with. And what the board was hearing from some of the states just had one quality indicator, and that was NCLEX pass rates, annual NCLEX pass rates. And some of the programs were, you know, threatening to sue them. You know, is this really a quality indicator of a nursing education program? Is there only one, and is that it? So the board of directors asked us to look into it. And next slide, please. So of course, we immediately went to the U.S. Department of Education because they have 3 major requirements. They have to graduate, you have to pass the licensure exam, and you have to get a job. So we asked them for their evidence, and we thought that would be easy and we'd get it. No, because they fund programs and they fund students, and that's what they're looking for. So they said it's not based on evidence, they have to get a job. So then we thought, okay, that's fine. This will still be easy. We'll go to the accreditors. The National Nursing Accreditors have requirements too, similar to the U.S. Department of Education. We will see what their evidence is. And we had them in to Chicago. They all visited us, and they also do not have evidence in back of their requirements because they must, in order to be recognized by the Department of Education, they must follow their requirements. So we had to go back to our board of directors and ask for this four-pronged research that we had to do. And you can imagine it certainly cost us some money. So we started with an integrative literature review. And again, we thought, okay, with an integrative literature review, we're going to find the evidence. Now, in order to be legally defensible, it must be robust evidence. It can't be, some of you may have heard about that Sullivan et al. Study that shows a 2-to-1 ratio of, clinical hours to simulation hours is where we should go because that's good evidence. Well, it was based on 42 students in 3 programs, 21 students in each group. So that isn't robust evidence. That would never be legally defensible. We needed national studies, and that's what we were looking for in the integrative literature review. We found some good literature, but we did not find enough evidence that would be legally defensible. So then we had to go 3 more ways. We did a national Delphi, and I was the PI on this, and on that national Delphi, we had both educators and regulators, but we also had clinical nurse managers who work with new graduates. And I have to say, we went back and forth, should we include that group or not? We were so happy we did, because we got a lot of evidence from that group that I don't think would have come from just educators and regulators. And our Delphi, as you know, you have to look for consensus. The literature says about 2/3 consensus is what you use. So that's what we used. Usually you go through 2 or 3 different surveys to get that consensus. We came up with consensus on 18 different characteristics. And these are characteristics where the graduates are safe and competent. And we came up on our first survey through. So that is reported in the literature, and it is excellent data. Then we had to do a quantitative study as well as a qualitative study. So we asked the boards, and they were so helpful to us, for 5 years of their annual report data. We got more than 11,000 annual reports from boards. Now that's quantitative data, like the number of students enrolled or your graduation rates, those kinds of things. But it was excellent. However, we did find in doing that the boards, because we were collecting their annual reports that each state did, they did them very differently. So we didn't have a lot of consistent data, but we do now. And then 5 years of site visit documents. The site visit really is the story of the program. From the quantitative data, we can see that, they have director turnover and faculty turnover and some bad things happening, but we don't know why. The characteristics of the program really help to tell us the story about what was going on in the program. Again, that was an excellent report. And we had outside qualitative researchers that did the analysis of that data, and they were excellent. And the next slide, please, will show you one of my favorite findings in that study. A lot of times you hear legislators, I don't know if this has happened in California, but it's happened in other states, that question, well, why do we have to have approval? We already have accreditation. Why do we need approval? Well, first of all, we have found, and we have this on our website, that there's major differences between accreditation and approval. Not that we don't like accreditation, it's actually one of our quality indicators, but they're very different. But also, what we didn't have was evidence about, the approval of a program. Our qualitative study found, really, this is the first evidence that approval does improve the standards. So that was very exciting for us to find as regulators. Next slide, please. So these studies are all reported in the JNR, the summer supplement issue. And again, that is on the JNR website. That is free of charge. Next slide, please. And then we brought in a group of experts. We brought in regulators, educators. And on our original committee on this, we did have AACN and NLN. In the group that reviewed the data, we had, again, AACN, NLN. We also included Odin, as well as other educators, and then attorneys, because it needed to be, legally defensible. And I will tell you, we came up with some ideas that the attorney said, no, that'll never go. And so they were really helpful. And then, of course, researchers. And at least 2 of the 4 national studies had to provide evidence for it to come out as a quality indicator. So there were a few things I wished would come out, but they weren't supported. Next slide, please. And all of those quality indicators, now that first article in JNRI showed you is 60 pages long, but everything, all of the quality indicators and a really nice table of the support of each one is in this small document. It's about 8 pages long, and it's on our website. So that is very valuable. Next slide, please. But then we thought, what if all these reports go on the shelf and nobody uses them, and that's that? So we decided that we had heard from boards of nursing that they really wanted help with doing their annual reports. It's almost in many of their rules that they have to have annual reports of the nursing programs in their state, but it is a lot of work, as we have found out. So we thought, well, let's put together a core database with all of the evidence-based quality indicators that we have and the demographics that came out very strong in the evidence. We'll put it together. It comes out to be 50 questions only. And we will see if the boards would like to use that for their annual report program. And then each state can add their own additional questions. So because, states have different things going on in their states. But when this was rolled out, because the report was published in the summer of 2020, so this was rolled out in September of 2020, and we all know what was going on in 2020. Well, we were afraid that the boards were just, too busy with the pandemic and everything that they wouldn't be able to join. But at that time, we had 20 boards that stepped up and joined. And now you can see we have 35 boards of nursing that are a part of this program. That means that we are collecting data, national data, on core quality indicators on all of the programs in these 50 states. And not only that, but the programs cannot go to the next question until they've answered the question before it. So we have answers to all of the questions, which is amazing. So next slide, please. And that tells us the types of programs that we're looking at. So we're looking at these 6 types of programs. And, there are some boards in their additional questions we're collecting APRN questions for. But mostly, well, certainly the 50 questions are for the pre-licensure programs. Next slide, please, for the demographics. So these are the demographics that we're looking at. Again, they came from the evidence, and probably the last 2 are really more other quality indicators, orientation of faculty and mentoring of full-time faculty. You do see a lot of orientation of full-time faculty. You do see a lot of mentoring as well reported. Part-time faculty, less so. Adjunct faculty, not as much. And yet we're seeing an awful lot of adjunct faculty out there. So, that is one area that, we might see improvement on, or we might expect improvement on. Next slide, please. So these are the key quality indicators. These are really so important for programs to be following. And what I tell faculty when I go out is these are what you should be using to benchmark your metrics with. And in terms of director turnover, if there are more than 3 directors in 5 years, that is very important. The less than 50% direct patient care, we don't see much of at all, which is good. However, we also are not seeing, and remember, we've got 35 programs or 35 states in this with all their programs. We're not seeing a lot of simulation at all nationally. You may be seeing more in California, because I think I heard that. Then less than 35% full-time faculty. Very important, and I can tell you many programs have problems with that. And then in terms of graduation rates, we're looking at on-time graduation rates because that's what students buy into when they're in the program, and we're seeing many don't have the 70%. Credentials of faculty at the graduate level, for the most part, that happens at the RN programs. And then credentials of program directors, doctoral level, not as much, but it's something that we can certainly reach for in the future. Now, I didn't point out NCLEX. So the literature did not support NCLEX pass rates or licensure pass rates at the annual level, like 80% pass rate, as a quality indicator. And one of the reasons is it is a lagging indicator. That means other things have gone wrong, which then the NCLEX falls. So what we're looking at are NCLEX trends. And I'm working with a statistician. We're looking at 5 years of trends. I'm working with him in order to give us kind of a marking of a trend. For example, I'm hoping we'll come up with something like -1, you're going down a little, or +1, you're going up. But we don't have that yet. But that is what both the boards of nursing and also the faculty should be looking at, are the trends of NCLEX pass rates, at least according to the evidence. Next slide, please, for the other quality indicators. And some of these are met very nicely, like disability support, and that's partly because of ADA. Low socioeconomic students, except for the very low programs, for the most part, are supported. However, we are seeing, and I was shocked to see this, services for non-native English-speaking students. Only about 50% of the programs have these services. And we also asked, what about the parent institution? Only about 50%. We want more diversity in our nurses. We need really to focus more here. And then also, and we had worked on a 3-year study on errors and near misses in nursing programs. So this one really is important to me. Having policies and procedures for students making errors and near misses. Only about 80% of the programs do that. So if you think about it, if a student makes an error in clinical and there's nothing that the program has in writing that they would follow through remediation or whatever, that can really be a problem as well. Now, the last two, certification of simulation faculty and accreditation of simulation labs, pretty low right now. And it really is something that we should simply be reaching for in the future. Next slide, please. So, you know, you would be surprised. We have been keeping track of clinical hours in the US since 2010, and we are seeing that it's really plummeted. Now, part of that is probably the pandemic, and we're hoping to see that it'll go up again. But it has plummeted so much that I have always been one to say we shouldn't have numbers of clinical experiences. It's really the quality of the clinical experience and not the number. And I have seen situations where the student has stood in the corner of a clinic and for 8 hours, and that's 8 hours of clinical experience, and that just, you know, does nothing. But I am beginning to see, when I see these numbers coming back from the annual report program, that we probably do need some minimum numbers, and we need some research to support it. Now, remember, the national simulation study, the one that NCSBN did, in order to use 50% simulation, every program to be in that study had to have at least 600 hours of clinical experiences. So, you know, that's what was expected at that time. Next slide, please. So you're probably wondering, how does this work? Well, we create the survey in the PDF and we send it to the Board of Nursing, and the Board of Nursing sends this out to their programs. And the reason the board sends it out instead of us is because they're much more apt to respond to you than they are to us. And the PDF is so they can keep the data, you know, as they're going through, and then put it into Qualtrics. For the most part, programs have 30 days to complete it, but it really depends on what the Board of Nursing wants. So if a board wants more, we have one board that wants 6 months. So their faculty have 6 months to answer it. Next slide, please. And any questions about anything on the survey, including the additional questions from the Board of Nursing, come straight to us so that they're not continually contacting the Board of Nursing with questions. And then if it's an additional question that we don't quite know what the board wants, then we can reach out to the board. And then we verify all of the kind of outlier types of answers to questions. And believe me, there are a lot. Like some programs will say they have 10 female students and 320 male students, and we know that that was probably switched. So we go through all of the data and clean it and verify it. And sometimes then when we're verifying, we have to get back to the program and ask about what they meant. Next slide, please. The programs complete this for each NCLEX code. And it took us a while to get to that because defining a program was very difficult. So this is now what we rely on. And as I said before, all the core questions are required, and faculty can go back until it's submitted and they can make any changes in going back. They just have to use the same computer and browser. Next slide, please. And depending on the amount of data verification, and let's say, I hope, California joins, there'll probably be a little more data verification because we have a lot of programs than we see in a place like Guam. But, you know, we'll do our best. After everything is verified, and it really comes down to if faculty answer us, because many times they'll take a while to answer us. 3 weeks after all the data has been verified, then you will get your report. And we have graphs, tables, matrices with each question. And this next slide is an example of the very last. It doesn't look too inviting, I know, but that's partly because we had to cross out all those programs. But this is a summary of programs that don't meet key quality indicators. And this has been very valuable to the board. And I have to tell you, we have a debriefing with all of the participating states in the fall. And it came from one of the people in the debriefing. They said, could we have something like this? And it has been very valuable. So you can see we have X's in those areas where they would need to improve. So what the board can do, if a program only has one, you know, okay, you can leave it alone, but you have 4 or 5, you might want to use this to collaborate with the program. And what we really like to emphasize is this is not a punitive thing. This is a collaboration with the program, because at this point, the outcomes are fine. You go back to the program and you're saying, you only have 19% of your faculty are full-time. Is there anything you can do to work on that? And then work together with the board to make those improvements before the outcomes go down. And remember that NCLEX is a lagging indicator. So it takes these characteristics to not be met before the NCLEX falls. So next slide, please, just in terms of the impact of the annual report program and how might you like this. Next slide, please. So these are some of the entities that the states have shared the data with. And this is really exciting to me. The employers are seeing it, the AONL is seeing it, the Center for Nursing is seeing all of these data. So we are really showing our data very, very far and wide. And that can really be helpful, especially for our legislators. And, you know, again, I kind of know nationally what's going on. I don't know specifically in California, but around the country, legislators are stepping in. They hear that there's a nursing shortage. Really, there's a nursing shortage regionally. Some areas don't have one at all, but they hear nursing shortage. They go straight to the board and they say, I want you to decrease the credentials of faculty so we can get more students in. And I want you to increase the max cap of students and double your students and increase your faculty by decreasing credentials. And yet these data, you know, would show exactly the opposite. What I have often told faculty is we asked for their max cap and now we're calling it the number of seats. We're seeing that most programs have more seats than they have enrolled students. And what that shows is there is a faculty shortage, and we certainly know that, and that's not regional. And part of that is because of faculty salaries. And therefore, you can take these data to the legislators, and in some states, for example, Washington, they have moved forward and they have increased salaries pretty significantly for, you know, the statewide faculty, but then the private programs had to do the same thing, you know, in order to be competitive. So next slide, please. So using the database, these are some of the comments we got from the surveys that we sent out both to the boards of nursing, but also to the programs. You know, student enrollment, faculty numbers, clinical hours are all hot subjects. Same with diversity, dean and director turnover. You know, that 3 and 5 years has really been a great finding. Admissions, retention and attrition of students. And then I love this one. Enrollment numbers were used to support legislation for grants for nursing students. So you can see, you can use these data with your legislators. And then another state uses the data for their state library so that the legislators can go to it. And maybe then they won't step in and just decrease the faculty credentials in order to increase the nursing shortage, which may not even be happening in that region. Next slide, please. And then because of that 35% full-time faculty, some of the programs are taking a closer look at part-time and adjunct faculty. It's interesting when we look at the aggregate data, and we do report the aggregate data so that programs can use their metrics according to the aggregate data. We see more adjunct faculty than we see full-time faculty. Then benchmarking for direct patient care hours, another program used. But I love this last one. 3 programs had below that 35% full-time faculty, went to their higher administration, and they had the data. That's what administrators like. And they each were able to get more faculty based on that quality indicator and what they were seeing as national data. So next slide, please. So what does the future bring? Well, we do hope that very soon all the boards of nursing will join and we will have that first National Nursing Education Database. You know, I know that NLN and AACN have databases, but they don't have all the programs like we do, and they don't have every question answered. And then international regulatory agencies have expressed interest, especially Canada has expressed interest in joining. We kind of like to bring in more boards of nursing first, but they'd like to see the difference between international and you know, national. And then we are developing a dashboard for illustrating aggregate findings. And I'm just going to show you a quick picture of the first page of our dashboard, but Next slide, please. If you just click the links, you'll be able to interact with this dashboard. So you can look at all the quality indicators, go down there to the quality indicators, for example, and look at them in terms of rural versus urban or ADN versus BSN. And it just is going to be a fascinating dashboard, I think, for faculty to look at some of the metrics and the boards of nursing as well. So that brings us to, this is a win-win situation, our last slide. Next slide. And we do now have complete annual reports. All of those questions are answered. It's very consistent, and we are creating the first ever nursing education database. At the same time, we are helping the boards of nursing collect all these data from their programs, because we go back to all the programs with questions or whatever. So the last slide is for questions. And I hope I didn't take too long, because I know you've had a lot in this meeting. And I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but there's my email if you do have some and we don't have time.
Thank you, Dr. Spector. Very impressive work that you and your folks at NCSBN and the other boards of nursing who participated in the study really did a phenomenal job. So thank you. Before we get further, NEWAC moderator, can you elevate Joanne Spetz? She's in the, and it's important because Dr. Spetz works very closely with EO Melby. So I'd like to make sure that she gets questions and answers. And I'm afraid, Nancy, that we have about 3 minutes. I apologize, but you've done a great job. So Joanne, are you with us? Just want to make sure.
I am here now.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Hi,
And
Joanne.
I don't think you saw a lot of it, but because you had
I looked at the slides before this meeting.
Okay,
Since they were
great.
part of the meeting materials.
Okay, great. And have you been in connection with Dr. Spector about some of the research here, or no? Not yet.
No, I don't think, I mean, I think we probably have some familiarity with each other's work, but we haven't talked about it in detail.
Yeah, but not about this, right?
Okay,
Right.
great. I see that we have information and possible action. So Lori, I'm wondering if you can give me some direction here.
I know that the ask is that this is possibly something that that we would recommend to our board to implement, that we would join and do this as part of an annual survey. I know that we do our annual school survey through Joanne Spetz and UCSF. That really focuses a lot on the nursing programs as well, but I believe there may be a role for both. And so that's something that I would like you guys to consider so that we can have nationwide data as well as Joanne Spetz California-based data that has a lot of longevity.
Great. I do recognize, and I looked at the wrong agenda item. This is an information only session, so there is no decision to be made here, but I welcome everybody, and I'm sorry, Nancy, that we're going to have to move to our next agenda item, but I really, with deep respect and much appreciation, thank you for being with us from Chicago. Hopefully you're staying warm.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll reach out to you if we have any additional questions. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I believe we did talk about adding her to a future agenda when we had more time for this to be something that you would maybe recommend.
We would love to have you back. And we will put you first next time, so you don't have to sit through our entire meeting.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, wonderful.
Well, you're welcome to stay on, Nancy. You just wouldn't be in the panelists. You would just be as an attendee. So we're scheduled for another 20 more minutes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. So moving to the next agenda item, I'm going to go straight to 8.0. So 8.0 is the discussion and possible action regarding the regional projections, potential survey content, and data collection strategies for the for the 2024 RN survey and potential changes to the annual school survey. So, Joanne, wanted to invite you to present this item.
Yes, I wasn't, I'm not sure that there is a lot of things to discuss here. There is a draft version of updated regional projections in with the BRN leadership to review. And when the 2024 survey data are fully analyzed and ready to go, then that model will form the basis for updating for a report that would be later into the summer. I think the more pertinent questions are for the annual school survey. Are there areas of kind of emerging trends or topics that we should think about adding to the annual school survey? Just ideas for us to consider pursuing. Similarly, for the RN workforce, which is inclusive of APRNs, they're all kind of sampled. Since all APRNs are RNs, they end up in the sample as well. If there are specific topic areas to think about for that. And then the last little piece, and there was data collection strategies. Something we've been puzzling over the years is the survey modes. So the annual school survey is all online, and deans and directors are wonderful about responding to it. Newly appointed deans and directors are always a little confused and overwhelmed, but they appreciate it when all is said and done. The survey of RNs we have been doing in mixed modes over the years. It started as paper, of course, and then we started adding an online option. And over the past few cycles, we have done initially an email fielding of it, and then we send the paper to whoever hasn't responded to the fielding, which still yields a fairly good number of responses. I'm still always surprised at how many people don't do it unless it shows up in an envelope in their mailbox. We are pondering at some point what experimentation we might want to do. It might not be for 2026's survey, but maybe, what experimentation should we possibly do about, there are kind of variations on the theme. Do more email to more people, but with a lower response rate, you worry about it being less representative of the full workforce. There are variations of sending a letter asking people to go to a website, which might do more than just emails asking people to go to a website, but maybe not as much for people who really like that paper survey. If you don't have a job where you're on the computer all the time with any flexibility of being on the computer, paper might be easier. And so we always ponder kind of where to go with that. And I'm happy to also just listen to any ideas that people have. And I know that like if there are ideas or thoughts that you have, you can also communicate them to me via Macaulay through I think the official NEWAC email list is the proper way to communicate any ideas that you might have outside of this meeting.
Thank you, Joanne. Alice, I see that your hand is up. Would you like to speak on this?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't put my hand down from earlier. Sorry.
No, it's quite all right. Ooh. Yes, Kathy. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Which, I come up with really good answers that way. When you're looking at like the RN survey, did we notice like an age difference between paper versus electronic? I'm assuming
yes, we always do.
Versus, yeah.
When we started doing the email first, we got much, a much higher response rate coming from younger nurses. That differential is not as big as it was, 8 years ago, but it does continue. And that always, raises a question, I guess, on if the paper surveys picking up disproportionately nurses who are near retirement. That can be interesting because you can learn something about their retirement intentions. But I think it also disproportionately picks up people who have retired already. And, and we do like to hear about their retirement and when did they retire and how old they were when they did so and so on. That's useful information. But, we honestly, we don't need a disproportionate response rate from that group.
Or
So yes,
how
the
to
responses are always interesting in that way.
or how to use social media, because I know our younger generation uses social media, but then how do you concentrate on that on California nurses only?
Yeah, we have not. So what we do in our sampling is we get the full list of licensed nurses from the board, including, obviously their addresses, email and paper, and then also their age. And so we then determine, based on previous response rates, how many nurses we should try to sample for each age region group. So for 9 regions and 6 age groups, that's like 54 different cells of trying to figure out how many people we should draw from each of those groups to make sure that we get enough responses in each region of California to feel pretty confident about making regional statements and projections. So if we did a general open, like, hey, all 500,000 nurses reply, or a social media recruiting, we would probably have a fairly biased response group out of that. Whereas being more intensive in, I don't want to say we harass people, but we email them rather persistently, and then we paper mail them rather persistently using a method that's called the Dillman method, named after a professor from Washington State University who kind of pioneered this approach that basically is trying to maximize the response rate from those people who are selected. The only other tool that anybody would put in their toolkit is offering a financial incentive to respond, which is, as I understand it, not permissible under the rules of the Department of Consumer Affairs. But it does help to have the BRN logo.
Oh, I think her.
Lost her.
Oh, okay. I'm like, is it me? um, okay, well, let's see if she comes back. Let's queue up any other last questions. I do want to.
I was gonna ask if they are considering text messaging instead.
Okay, great. Macaulay or Lori, can you make note of that and ask Joanne? And then I see Carmen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and this was for Joanne, because I think she wasn't at the last NEWAC meeting when we did the subcommittee report outs. But one of the things that Hazel and I were looking at was areas to update the RN workforce survey. So that's something that we're looking at. So if Joanne has like a date that she would prefer to get feedback on, that would be helpful for me and Hazel.
Great. Lori or Macaulay, can that be sent to that question be sent to Joanne to see when she needs to get that feedback back to her? Or is that not possible? Because would that violate Bagley?
It was reported out at a public meeting, so we can share that.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right. Okay. Sorry, Joanne. I don't know if there's a motion I don't think there's a motion, so we should open a public comment.
And then actually we'd have to open public comment for both 7.0 and 8.0. 7.0 was missed before we went on to this.
I I'm wondering, given that we have 10 minutes, I'm wondering if I should go to 9.0 and just get public comment for the last three.
I think we'll do public comment for 7 and 8. They're very similar. So
Okay.
those that were waiting to comment on surveys could, and then we will move to 9.0 to acknowledge receipt and hopefully schedule a additional NEWAC committee.
Okay, that sounds great. So, Mark, can you please open it up for public comment for 7.0 and 8.0, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment." Whoa, I lost my reading here. Can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing in the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment," or you can raise your hand because that is enabled as well. Committee Chair Chan, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Do we still have no physical or in-person representation in our Sacramento location?
Yes, no representation here.
Okay, thank you. So there are no public requests for comments nor hands raised. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Joanne, we're gonna send you some questions via email. So
Great. Sorry about that. My computer just disconnected from the internet. So there you go. I'm
there you
back.
go. No worries. No worries. We're going to move to 9.0, and this is information only acknowledgement that the BRN NEWAC received 2 letters, one from Copper Mountain College and the other from the California Association of Colleges of Nursing, outlining some concerns. And so for this, I'd actually like to start with public, just so that everybody's aware. Lori and I, when we received these letters, we said, this is a lot of information. We won't have enough time to cover it. So we're going to schedule another meeting to actually go through the details of this. So this is just introducing and acknowledging that we've received the letters. And we're going to schedule another meeting. Of NEWAC.
So before we go to public comment, that's what I was asking that we get completed. And so this is to acknowledge receipt of this letter. And we are looking at
the 2 letters.
The 2 letters. I'm sorry, they're both posted online so that everybody is aware of what the ask was and what the concerns are. And because it is a very extensive list of items that need to be addressed, we've asked to schedule a NEWAC committee that would allow us to have time to address the majority of these and try to address all of them. And so we are looking at dates that we have staff and everybody available to manage the meeting. It is still a online virtual meeting as we have here. And so the 2 dates that I would like to propose would be June 11th or June 25th. If either of those days work, I would love for you guys to take a look at that and see if we can get this on the calendar so that we can schedule an entire NEWAC to address the issues that were raised in both of these letters.
Lori, can I just triple check? Because I thought it was June 18th because there's no IEC on that day.
There is no IEC on that date, but I am not available.
Got it. I'm sorry. Okay, that's fine.
Which is why I'm offering out June 11th and June 25th. I did share that to Macaulay when she sent out the possible dates. It may not have been communicated back to you.
Sorry about that. So, well, if you're not
No
available, we're
problem.
not having it. So,
I mean, I could change things to
no,
make
no, no,
myself
no, no.
available if
Let's
it's the
no.
only date, but I would like to explore the 11th and the 25th first.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, my anniversary is the next day.
Yeah,
I'm
enjoy.
trying to take a
Yes,
day off.
please take the day off. Um, so, um, so given that we have these 2 days, and also we want to make sure that the people who sent in the letters, are also available. I'd like
Right.
to know, um, so as you're all looking at your calendars, I'd like to open it up to public comment and elevate. I think I see Dr. Kimberly Paris is an attendee. Can I elevate her first? Because she is
You
the,
wouldn't have to open to public comment for that. She can be a person that is presenting, and so we can
okay,
elevate her to a panelist to
okay.
have a discussion about this. So if you can elevate Kimberly Paris, please, Mark, then we can manage this. And then just being mindful again, Garrett, we have 4 minutes. So if we can get some dates, have Kimberly do just a brief introduction because she's going to have all the time in the world on the date
Yeah.
that we get scheduled so that we can get
Right.
public comment out of the way. Thank you.
Thanks. Kimberly, you're on mute, but we'd love to hear you.
Hi there. It looks like my camera might not be connected to WebEx. I apologize. But thank you so much for having me. You can hear me, right? Oh, here's
Yes.
my video. I see it. Now I have a video option. Here we go. Apologies. Hello. There we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for elevating me and also for moving our letter from California Association of Colleges of Nursing to your agenda. Dr. Chan, thank you so much for including that and for making time in the future for us to discuss some of the issues that we posed in the letter that are around specifically clinical placement challenges, some of the administrative burden that is that needs to be addressed among some of the forms and reporting that needs to be done, and around implementing AB 2684. I'm looking at my notes over here because I know we're on a short timeline. And so California Association of Colleges of Nursing, we represent all of the baccalaureate, graduate, and doctoral programs in the state of California. And through our conversations with the CSU system, I'm also the director of nursing for the Cal Poly Humboldt, which is part of the CSU system. And through other colleagues, we've come up with the letter that we put forward that's in your agenda that I look forward to having the opportunity to address. We really want to work collaboratively with people to have an innovative and progressive workforce that is equitable for all of us around clinical placements. And so we look forward to working with the committee on kind of dissecting what we've come up with as some of the issues and solutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paris. Could either or both June 11th and 25th work for you?
Yeah, the 25th would work for me. The 11th, I don't think that will be. I'll be headed to a concert.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for being here, and I apologize for the short time, but again, we will have a whole meeting for you. So
Sounds
we
good.
look
I
forward to
appreciate
more
it. Thank you.
conversations. Yes, thank you. Just wanted to double check, is there anybody from Copper Mountain College here? I see that the author of the letter is Dr. Darren Otten, but I don't see him in the list.
I'm looking to see if he's there. I've met with Darren on several occasions. I can give some quick background on this. We did a BRN proposed legislative change last year for faculty approval to be moved to a licensing process instead of going through the schools. There is a remediation process that is addressed in that legislation, and that was modified from its current version that's currently in regulations that allows for faculty remediation. What it doesn't specifically allow for is director of nursing remediation. And that is what the ask is from this Copper Mountain president for director of nursing, assistant director of nursing kind of remediation. And so I did pose that question out at a COADN meeting, and I got a lot of negative response that they didn't feel that that was appropriate. But I do want to make sure that we do bring it up here and have more discussion on assistant director and director remediation. And if that's something that you guys would consider and potentially make some recommendations on, but we can address that. There are pathways to become a director of nursing and assistant director of nursing, and that may not be clear to everyone. So even if the decision is to not do a remediation process, I can very clearly outline the pathways to get that. That does allow for people outside of academia to become nursing assistant directors and program directors.
Fantastic.
And that's
Thanks,
it in
Lori.
kind of a nutshell. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Can we look and see how many people can join on June 11th? I didn't even look at my calendar, my goodness.
Garrett,
Oh,
Kim wasn't available on the 11th.
two are unavailable on the 11th? Okay.
Kim wasn't available.
Oh, Kim is not available on the 11th. I apologize. Sorry. Can we look at June 25th? Okay. No. Okay.
So June 25th, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we do have quorum. If it is Carmen, Wendy, Tammy Van Holt, Kathy Hughes, Sandra Millers, LaCandice, and Tanya Altman. However,
I can do
obviously
it too.
open to everybody else. Garrett, you can do it. So we would have quorum on the 25th, and then if anybody else was able to free up and join, that would be fantastic.
Okay, great. I didn't do public comments. So I need to do public comment.
Well, we'd like to make a motion that we will
Oh, I'm
schedule
sorry.
this for a future agenda for discussion, and we are adding a NEWAC committee to June 25th with more information to follow. If you want to say so moved, that can be the motion, and then we can get a second, please.
Second from Altman.
Thank you. And we can go out to public comment.
We don't need to, all those hands raised, we don't need to acknowledge those, or are those coming after public comment?
That was us just raising, saying that we're available on the
Gotcha.
25th. So
Gotcha.
that
Okay.
was it.
All righty, we will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give you reminders as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Chan, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in Sacramento. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, so I need to vote. Or is there any other discussion from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to do a roll call. So this is about the motion to add another NEWAC meeting on June 25th. So Garrett Chan, yes. Janine Graves?
Yes.
Thank you. Tanya Altman?
Yes.
Thank you, Tanya. Tammy Vansel?
Yes.
Thank you, Tammy. LaCandice Ochoa?
Yes.
Thank you, LaCandice. Wendy Hansborough?
Yes.
Thank you, Wendy. Saji Guzman?
Yes.
Thank you, Saji. Thank you, Saji. Yes, thank you. Alice Benjamin?
Yes.
Thank you, Alice. Hazel Torres?
Yes.
Thank you, Hazel. Judy Cornell is not here with us, I don't think. No, I don't see her. Kathy Hughes.
Kathy Hughes, yes.
Thank you, Kathy. Jacqueline Bowman is not with us. Carmen Comsty.
Yes.
Thank you, Carmen. Joanne Spetz.
Yes, but I won't be there.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. And Sandra Miller.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you so much. So the motion carries and we will have that additional meeting on the 25th. So I just need some direction. I think we skipped over 6.0. The report out of
We
NEWAC
did
subcommittees.
skip over that, and that's something that we can ensure that is in the next NEWAC agenda.
Okay, so we're going to push 6.0 to the next NEWAC agenda. We'll start with that, and then we will go ahead and launch into the 2 letters. So with that being said, thank you so much. I apologize for going over, but it was a great meeting today, and I wish you all a good spring, and I will see you in June for anybody who can show up. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Great meeting, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Great job, Garrett.
Thanks.